It's Query and Company.
I'm going to be keeping you company for the next few hours.
You are not going to believe the company.
This company.
You're going to bankrupt your mama's company?
At least I have the radio to keep me company.
On 93.5 and 107.5, The Fan.
Nembhard sends it right sideline. Halliburton there against Dort. A long one on the way, and it's perfect from out near the right hash mark.
Siakam got it and lays it in.
How does he come up with that basketball? And look at T.J. McConnell.
T.J. McConnell with the steal. Siakam for three. It's no good. McConnell the rebound to Maturin, who lays it in.
And here comes Maturin. Right edge of the arc, slows and waits, gives it to Halliburton. Halliburton, right edge. He wants three, and he's got three. We're under 9 minutes to play. The shot clock at 8. McConnell dances, spins, fumbles, picks it up, and can't finish in front. Rebound to the grateful Nembhard over on the left wing. It was tipped in his direction. He grabbed it and laid it in. And then McConnell steals, and the Pacers get 4 quick points in a matter of seconds. The game is tied with 8.5 to go. Driving the lane, Williams back to Holmgren, and Turner made him eat a three. Holmgren picks it back up with 3 to shoot, drives into traffic, and he lost it out of bounds. Miles Turner, with his 4th block shot of the night, made Holmgren swallow a 3 without chewing.
My goodness.
Here comes Halliburton, outnumbered, he slows and waits. Now drives forward with the left hand, floating to the glass. No, but Y-E-S, as Toppin pulled it off the front of the rim and flushed it with 2 hands. Halliburton using the Turner screen, driving to his left, cross-court pass to Neesmith, and he buries a cold-blooded 3 from the right sideline.
Falling out of bounds, contested, knockdown 3-ball.
The Pacers rallied and were able to finish this one off, 116 to 107. Yeah!
That was awesome. Everything about it was awesome. And here's the thing. I thought it was a very astute point made yesterday when we were discussing the game number 3. And in doing so, we were going over, all of the different scenarios, and we were talking about what happens if, where Indiana was, and the fact that Oklahoma City has really kind of owned 7 of the 8 quarters so far through the first 2 games. And as we were discussing it yesterday and talking about it, I thought a very interesting point was made, and I'm not even certain that I can recall which guest on our show it was that said this, but I believe
it was Andrew
Schlecht from The Athletic, when he said, it feels like when you win a playoff game, and he was quoting Steve Nash, that you are never going to lose another game. But when you lose one, you feel like, are we ever going to win again? And in that game last night, off the start, first off, the atmosphere downtown was awesome. The energy and enthusiasm of this city and the fans was incredible. There were so many people in the building. At times, I turned around at one point and just said, it is surreal to think this is, in fact, the NBA Finals. Because you go to so many games that, it feels like just a game. And then you stop and you go, no. This is the Finals, though. It's the first home game of the Finals. Right out of the box, when Pascal Siakam was aggressive, and they went right to Pascal Siakam for the first, I think, 3 possessions. And what did I talk about yesterday? I'm not saying that this is exactly what happened, but it felt like it was to an extent. That by going to Siakam, it started to free things up. And you did have aggressive Tyrese Halliburton. And yet, the Pacers, when they got off to that good start, then Oklahoma City very quickly, their pace, they were playing fast. Their defense was doing exactly what they do by forcing turnovers and slapping, the ball away in the middle of the paint. And at one point, I will admit, The Pacers were down, I think, 7 or 10. And I will admit, I said aloud, they're in trouble. Here's the thing about yesterday that made it awesome. Yesterday was awesome because the Indiana Pacers went into Game 3 in their first game in the I keep saying Eastern Conference, in the NBA Finals. They went in and they won that game. That was not a game where Oklahoma City, came in and just had a couple of fluke plays down the stretch and you said, like, well, they stole one. No. The Pacers yesterday, here's what they did. They did two things to me, aside from the Siakam-Halliburton thing that I just mentioned. There were two things that happened that I thought were the story of that game. The first was, I always use the term the car wash. When you are trying to get to the rim against the Oklahoma City Thunder, it's like trying to walk through a car wash. There's just things spinning and arms reaching in and stuff slapping at you from every angle. And for the first, I guess, quarter of the first quarter last night, it looked like that again. And then something fascinating happened. Something fascinating happened that I love. And that is that the Indiana Pacers said, you know what? Because you could hear coming into the arena, there were some Oklahoma City fans there. And walking into the arena, they started chanting, OKC, OKC. And the crowd was chanting that going into Gainbridge Fieldhouse. And then all of a sudden people would kind of boo and try to get louder and start chanting, no, like, Indiana and whatever else, right? Because the message was sent of, we understand that you, the fans, are coming in here and doing what you're used to. You are doing what you're used to do, or used to be doing by chanting that way. But this is Gainbridge Fieldhouse, the home of the Indiana Pacers, and it's actually, this is how it's going to go this way. And the same thing happened on the court between the two teams. Because Oklahoma City started that game by saying, this is how we're going to do things. And then the Pacers responded with, you know what? Normally, maybe. But this is Gainbridge Fieldhouse, and we're actually going to take possession of our fieldhouse, and we're going to take home, this is our home court. And they flipped the script and started doing what Oklahoma City normally does, but did it better. The Pacers ran the car wash. And all of a sudden, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who, and I heard Tyrese Halliburton use this phrase, and it's the perfect phrase. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who is slippery. He didn't have anywhere to slip. He didn't have anywhere to slide. Every time, because they decided, you know what we're going to do? We're going to put Nembhard on him, or Siakam on him, or Nesmith on him, but there is a constant rotation over to help. And that's a challenging thing to do because Oklahoma City has other players that could then go out and get theirs. And the Pacers took things a little bit different approach because what did we talk about? And maybe it was a masterclass comment from Rick Carlisle. Maybe Rick Carlisle schooled all of us when he said after game 2, that guy's got 34 when he gets off the bus. Because what Carlisle seemingly was saying was, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is going to get his. We've got to make sure we limit everybody else. And instead, what the Pacers did was said, we're still going to lock down Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And then we're going to see if the combo of Williams, Holmgren, Caruso, if that group, even Isaiah Joe hit 2 threes, if that group has enough to offset what we're doing. And they limited SGA brilliantly. And they bothered him. And they ran the car wash on him. And he never got comfortable. And that's one of the best players in the NBA, one of the most elite scorers, and a most valuable player. And they limited him. They didn't shut him down, but they limited him. And then the other thing they did is Holmgren was involved early. But after that, the Pacers absolutely made life miserable for him. And he was frustrated beyond frustrated. You could see it. I saw it on numerous occasions. At one point, Hartenstein came in to substitute for him, and Holmgren had that look of like a whooped dog coming off the floor. He was mentally fatigued. He was physically fatigued. And Miles Turner, who we now know was battling illness, was not effective for 98.8% of that game. But the 1.2% of the time he was effective when it mattered most because he made key defensive stops down the stretch when the Pacers most needed it. The Indiana Pacers last night in Game 3 of the NBA Finals in 2025 took a 2-1 advantage. They took a 2-1 advantage, meaning that in 80% of the equations, roughly, that teams go into a Game 3 tied. The winner of Game 3 wins 80% of the time, goes on to win the series. They took a game where they knew that they had 3 games at home. If they win all 3 at home, they are NBA champions for the first time in the history of the franchise. They're the first franchise in the history of the game to win both an ABA and NBA title, and they are half of the way there. And they're half of the way there because what they did yesterday is they stood up and said, you know what, we're actually going to do this by looking at Oklahoma City and saying, we are going to beat you, and when we do so, we're going to see whether or not you start to show and exhibit the same signs that Milwaukee showed, that Cleveland showed, and that New York showed. And all 3 of those teams had different scenarios where they looked up, they saw the Pacers were not going away, they wiped the blood and tasted it in their own mouth and thought, what in the world have we gotten ourselves into? And that's exactly what Oklahoma City looked like in the fourth quarter of that game. They looked tired, they looked frustrated, they looked bewildered, and they looked beaten because the Pacers punched them in the mouth, and here's the beauty of it. And Oklahoma City is a great team, a great team. The Pacers beat a great team last night, and there are 3 guys that did it the most for them. 3. Tyrese Halliburton was back to Tyrese Halliburton, okay? He took 17 shots. He hit half of his threes. He had 11 assists. He was rebounding the basketball. Goes without saying, Tyrese Halliburton, fabulous performance. Exactly what they needed. Pascal Siakam was the guy that you traded for. Pascal Siakam was the guy that has an NBA ring. He had 21 points. He was aggressive early, and he defended at an elite level. He defended at an elite level. They have elite defenders, do the Pacers. Nembhard, Nesmith. But what does Oklahoma City do that's elite? They defend at all positions. So, too, last night did Indiana. And Siakam was a big part of that. But there are really 3, you could even go 4 guys to me that were a huge factor last night. And let me tell you where this all stems from. Obi Toppin was sensational. There was a point late in the game where Toppin was on the floor, and I turned around and said, you know what? I know that they've got to get Siakam back on the floor, and I understand why. I mean, I understand it. But I almost hate to take Toppin out because his energy, his rotation, his ability to keep loose balls alive, his disruption. Obi Toppin, huge applause to Obi Toppin. Thank you, Eddie. Obi Toppin, when his number was called, did what was asked. Benedict Mathurin, more on that, it goes without saying. Benedict Mathurin, who's been much maligned. Benedict Mathurin, who has been labeled by myself and other people, not officially, but at least at cocktail parties, as possibly the square peg in the round hole with this franchise. Great player, well, good player, at times great offensive player, but seemingly an isolation guy in a system that has quick movement. And Benedict Mathurin is one that a lot of people were like, maybe his greatest asset to the franchise is going to be that he's good trade bait. That was, and Benedict Mathurin, whose minutes have been inconsistent, his play has been inconsistent, his postseason has been at times frustratingly absent. Credit to Benedict Mathurin, because when his number was called and his team most needed it, he goes out and delivers that. And does it with a resolve and a tenacity of, how you like me now? I'm not going away. Benedict Mathurin represented the Pacers' entire mantra last night. And they rode him to 27 points, and he was brilliant. T.J. McConnell. What more can you say about T.J. McConnell? When the Pacers last night, on multiple occasions, needed energy, that guy comes in. What did he deliver for the first time in NBA Finals history? 10 points, 5 assists, and 5 steals in a game. He had every time that it felt like there was going to be a lull. Every time it felt like there was going to be a drop-off. T.J. McConnell was the guy that somehow or another comes up with the perfect play. I have said forever that the thing about T.J. McConnell that most impresses me as a basketball player is that nobody understands angles better than T.J. McConnell. And that sounds like the dumbest, weirdest, most obscure, like Bob Ross painting kind of way of analyzing a basketball game until you watch him. And then you realize that when a team is making an inbound pass and T.J. McConnell seemingly is in a completely different lane, he understands the angle of where that ball is going to be, and before you know it, he's over there and he intercepts it out of nowhere and then contours his body around the defense to get the right angle to be able to bounce it off the glass and score. It's remarkable. And then the entire angling towards the crowd of getting them pumped up and screaming at the crowd and screaming at his own bench. T.J. McConnell last night, when you look at championship teams and you look at teams that win titles, it is, yes, you need a Tyrese Halliburton. Yes, you need a Pascal Siakam. But you need a T.J. McConnell, the guy that knows when the jolt is needed. You needed a Benedict Mathurin, a guy that you don't necessarily scout in the game plan if you're the opposition, but then he pops up and hits you for 27. Now you got something more to worry about, right? And the last guy in my group here of unsung heroes last night was Ben Shepherd. And I can hear you right now. What? Like, I get in the car to go to lunch and turn on Sports Talk Radio, and I'm super excited to hear about Tyrese Halliburton getting back and being a player last night and hugging Reggie Miller after the game. And Reggie Miller, and it was awesome. He was sitting next to Oscar Robertson and everybody that was there at the game. And Reggie Miller's wearing a Mark Jackson jersey, which was super cool. And maybe that was like throwing shade at the fact that Mark Jackson's not doing the ESPN broadcast. I don't know. But, you know, Chris Denari was doing a quarter of play-by-play because he's not able to do it as a television voice, and the Pacers had him do it for a quarter on the radio, which was awesome. And I turn it on, and this guy in Indianapolis, when I turn it on, is talking about Ben Shepherd. Ben Shepherd played 18 minutes and scored 4 points. He had 2 rebounds. Correct. But you know what he did? Ben Shepherd came in and gave you what's called quality minutes. And quality minutes are when a guy comes in and you know that on multiple occasions, he has to spell somebody for a 4 to 5 minute stretch, and he puts himself in the right position to bat a loose ball. Things, and I know it's a cliche, things that don't show up in the box score, Ben Shepherd did them for 18 solid minutes. He was in the right spot defensively. You don't lose a lot, and Nembhard needs a breather, or you're trying to protect Nembhard in terms of his foul count. And so you have to take Nembhard off the floor. And Ben Shepherd comes in, and you don't lose a lot defensively. And if the ball rotates over to him and you need a shot, he can hit it for you. But the number of times that the Pacers, there was a stretch there in the fourth where you knew that they needed to make it like a 3-possession game. And they didn't capitalize, and you thought, oh, gosh, Oklahoma City's going to come and transition back the other way, and now you're back to a 4 or 2-point game. And Shepherd is the one that was keeping the basketball alive. Shepherd's the one that's diving on the floor and just simply batting the ball to Siakam or Halliburton, who then flush it back out and reset it. Those are the little things. And this is what this all comes down to. That win last night, which puts the Pacers halfway there. But they still need 2 more. That win was absolutely 150% a testament to Rick Carlisle and the chess game, to Kevin Pritchard and the ability to not just recognize pieces of a puzzle, but how they fit, to Chad Buchanan for thinking of ways to acquire said players, but most importantly, to the scouting group of the Indiana Pacers. From Ryan Carr all the way down, because it's one thing to recognize players, and it's one thing to see talent. It's another to recognize people and to assemble character, which are the 2 most overused things in sports. And the beauty of this Pacers team and the beauty of this Pacers run is every team in professional sports, college sports, high school sports, every team talks about their culture. Every team talks about their character. Every team talks about their selflessness. And 95% of them, it's all talk. But when you have a guy like a Benedict Mathurin that knows that when his back's against the wall and it's most needed, is able to go out and play that way and come up with 27 points in 22 minutes, and every single point was critical. And never waver away from the fact that he had a belief that he could do that and didn't get frustrated or wallow or have self-pity enough to shy away from finally being there when they called on him. When you have a Ben Shepherd who doesn't care that the press release after the game is going to say that he scored 4 points. When you have a Ben Shepherd that doesn't care that he only got 2 3-point shots and he missed both of them, but is still willing to do everything possible at a high level and high rate of tenacious play to extend plays and facilitate for his teammates. When you have an Obi Toppin who was dismissed where he came from and comes in here and isn't a starter but plays starter minutes and gives you 28 minutes and his nonstop energy is a plus 18 overall, comes up with the play that probably sealed it and blew the roof off of Gainbridge Fieldhouse, bats away shots, slides over and makes things frustrating for Holmgren, slides over and seals off lanes as a backup for when they are trying to bottle up Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. When you have a guy like an Obi Toppin, who was the college player of the year, who got drafted by his hometown team, who many thought was going to be, well, this is a guy that was drafted in the top 15, etc. And he comes over and just says, I'm willing to do, I got 8 points. But it's bigger than that. Having those players willing to do those things is what's called culture, and that's what's called character. And that is determined by extensive scouting and interviewing and getting to know the people and getting to know the character. Every guy in the NBA can play, but how many people in the NBA can selflessly play? Everybody in the NBA has talent, but how many people in the NBA have doses of humility? And that's what you saw on display last night. And the Indiana Pacers last night, for the first time in this series, no, not when Tyrese Halliburton hit that shot, not when it was Nesmith who tapped the ball to Toppin, and Toppin who then knew to give the ball to Halliburton at the end of game 1, and Halliburton hits that shot. It was not in that moment that Oklahoma City for the first time looked like maybe they were thinking to themselves, wait a minute, what are we in store for here? And last night, for the first time at the end of that game, the Oklahoma City Thunder, who are an elite team, and they are a great team, and I think it's going to be even harder to beat them in game number 4. But last night, for the first time, what you saw was a team that looked around and said, we might have met somebody that's willing to be our match. And even if they aren't, they think they are. And they think they are because they have the character, the humility, and the selflessness to, as a group, believe that as a group, they all know their role to do what it takes to have us sitting here sucking wind and grabbing onto the bottom of our shorts late in this fourth quarter, looking at the clock thinking, what in the world have we gotten into? And what you've gotten into now is a team in the Indiana Pacers that is 2 home court wins away from winning the NBA title. And I'm telling you, if it happens, I want 250,000 people in downtown Indianapolis to celebrate it because it represents everything about this city that we love. And I love everything about it. Tony East was there last night, going to join us. Something weird happened to me also at the beginning of the game, and it took about a quarter and a half before I realized what it was that was taking place. I'll let you know about that, but Tony East to talk more about what took place last night on a celebratory Thursday. It's a celebration day today, and we're going to do it collectively as a city as the Pacers knock yet another quarter off the list. 2/4 now, 1/2 the way there to an NBA crown. I would like to know this. I'm a night owl, right? And I'm up late typically anyway. It's funny. Last night at the game, Matt Krieger, who's the photographer for the Indianapolis Star, was with the Indianapolis Star. Now he's the photographer for the Indiana Pacers. Great guy and brilliant photographer. Before the game, he took a picture of Shannon and I just in our, I saw him, and so he just took a picture of the two of us for us to have, right?
Oh, so sweet.
It was nice of him. And he sent it to me. He texted it to me last night at about 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm sure he was going through his photos, right? And so I sent it to her immediately. I texted it to her. And she immediately texted me back, and I said, you're still awake? It's 2 o'clock in the morning. And then I thought to myself, I'll bet half the city is still awake. Because the game didn't end until, 11:15, 11:30?
Somewhere around that time,
and there was this, this celebration downtown in general. But you're just wired, right? I'd like to know the average time that, send me a text. I'd like to know the average time that people actually fell asleep last night. It's got to be post 1:30, right?
Well, I didn't leave here till 1:30.
We were working.
I know.
But of people that just were watching the game, there's no way that people just turned it off and went right to bed, right?
Let me put it this way. I think my eyes were just shutting to go to sleep 9 hours ago.
Yeah, that's probably about right. That's. I think for a lot of people, it's 1:30, 2 o'clock last night. Tony East joins us now on the Rhine Geist Brewery guest line. I'm sure thrilled to be doing so based on that segue. So, Tony, I will begin with you. You obviously were working last night as well, but there was just an energy that 11:15 felt like 8:30 at that point. You fell asleep what time last night?
About 4:15. I could have kept going, honestly, but we have practice to get to today, so I can't be lollygagging.
Fair enough. Okay.
We got the long shower. This will only be funny to media people, but we got the long shower guys on the podium last night. I knew right away it was going to be a long night for me.
Fair enough. Okay. Here's the thing. Look, there's a lot to unpack here. I'll begin with this. When you talk about lollygagging, and look, they're tremendous, and I'm not meaning this as a disrespect to them at all, but last night and the end of that game was the first time, I'm not going to say that Oklahoma City was lollygagging, but it was the first time that they looked both physically and mentally told from the Indiana Pacers. And I thought to myself, with a short turnaround in this series now before Game 4, Indiana has to win Game 4. But that was the first time that I thought Oklahoma City showed vulnerability. What say you?
You have the perfect seats to see it. Like the whole fourth quarter, every stoppage, OKC players immediately hands on their knees, right? Look at the floor, pant for a sec, get back in the play. Like they were gassed. And that is what the wear down effect the Pacers always talk about is, right? Like over the course of a game, you pick up 94 feet, you run like crazy, you only have to play your best players somewhere between 32 and 35 minutes. So everybody's always at max fitness level when they're on the floor. They can just wear you down over the course of a game. And it was the first time you've really seen the Thunder hit it and go, whoa, like what are we doing? And their offense was just a mess in that quarter. In Game 1, it was a little bit like that, but not quite as much. They had, a big lead in the spirit of the crowd behind them, like as they blew that lead still. But in this game, just they only scored 18 points in that quarter. They couldn't get anything going once J-Dub stopped making those crazy running across the lane floaters over Neesmith. Their offense died, and I that was the first time I agree with you that I've seen them at that level of gassed this entire series, and that's just what the Pacers hope they can do. And obviously there's ways the Thunder can adjust to what the Pacers did. They were very good at it in Game 2, but I totally agree. It was the Pacers' effect that and the ethos they hope to have was like perfectly on display last night.
Tony, you are around this team. As a matter of fact, I'll go so far as to say I think you probably are, in terms of coverage of this team. I don't know that there's anybody who is around it more than you. Okay, so you would be the perfect person to break this down. I just got done talking about how, to me, last night was the total personification of preparation. That was a preparation victory because, and I don't mean preparation in game plan, I mean preparation of people. Obi Toppin, Ben Shepherd, TJ McConnell, Benedict Mathurin. Those are four guys that I thought were all invaluable last night. But not every franchise is able to get players that have that kind of the character and selflessness to just simply do what it takes to win and not worry about the stats of it. And Can you kind of, I guess, share for the listeners the things that you see about this roster and those people that are built within it that indeed make it different that we're seeing now unfold before our eyes?
Yeah, I talked privately to a few people about kind of exactly what you're saying. Like, to me, this is the player development and human development finals, right? Because that's what's made the Thunder and Pacers possible. You can't just stumble into a situation where you're playing 10 guys in the finals. Like, you have to develop every player 1 through 15 to be able to trust them, to be able to do that. And so that is part of what you're saying with preparation, is it takes years of, like, owning a guy's skills so that, like, Rick Carlisle is comfortable that Ben Shepherd took an off-the-dribble elbow jumper in the first quarter of the game. You know, like, when's the last time we saw him take that shot ever? And he made it, right? And, like, that kind of stuff you just never see coming. And it's also a human development thing that throughout the course of this postseason, this season, these years of this being the core of the Pacers, all those guys that had these great games off the bench have seen their minutes and role wax and wane a million ways. And we always hear the phrase, stay ready. And that's like, it sounds so simple, but it's not. To, like, be prepared for what your role is going to be in a game, to execute whatever little different things you have to do. And the thing that made them all have special games to me is they all did something that, like, only they can do on this team. Not maybe, like, singularly. A lot of guys can do lots of things, but, you know, TJ McConnell is one of the only guys who can, like, every single play, get in the teeth of the defense, make somebody rotate. Ben Mathurin's the only guy who can isolate, score the way he can on this team. Ben Shepherd's one of the only guys who can run around like a maniac for every second he's on the floor to exhaustion, right? Like, Obi Toppin, do I even need to explain what he does that no one else can do? Like, that guy's a freak. He's a gazelle who can jump out of the gym. So when all those guys do all those things, it is exactly what you're saying. It is the culmination of years of preparation, of human and player development on display in the finals. The Thunder have some elements of this with their bench too, but they haven't had I guess they did kind of in game 2, but they haven't had a game like that where every single bench player just totally hummed and kicked butt. And I totally agree with you. And again, I keep using this word, but last night just felt like such an ethos of the Pacers win, where everything that they've been trying to build happened in a finals game and they beat a 68-win team.
You know, Tony, you know, you talk about Toppin, right? And you're right. I mean, a gazelle that can jump out of the gym is the perfect way to say it. But yet, knowing that that's what your role is, and it's not to be a 20-10 guy. You know, there are a lot of guys that eventually would just wilt away from that and say, look, I want to be the guy somewhere. I'd rather go to Charlotte. You know what I mean? But watching that last night and then thinking about Oklahoma City's role players, I wondered this, and I'm going to ask this to you, Tony East, and that is, Rick Carlisle said that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was going to get 34 as soon as he got off the bus. And so you thought to yourself, okay, so Carlisle is admitting that they're going to let Shai get his and then shut down the role players. In fact, what they did was they kept Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in a box that entire game last night and then said, okay, we'll frustrate Holmgren late and we'll wear those guys down, but this guy's not going to get 34 against us. Did Rick Carlisle play all of us there? Was that a bait and switch?
In some ways, you know, he's a master of those little quotisms here and there. Here comes Precious Achiuwa. They've been really worried about him the whole series, Jake. I don't think they were really worried about Precious Achiuwa last round. Yeah, maybe so. And that's the best he's been defended maybe in this playoffs. Like, he didn't have a lot of room to operate. Like, what do you have at halftime? 8 points, 6 points, something like that? I mean, they were all over him, and they did a great job of that. And, like, it's similar to the effect that I feel with Halliburton that I feel like people always miss in games like Game 2 for the Pacers, where when you slow Shai, like, you slow everything the Thunder do, because he is so much of their offensive half-court identity that it's so hard for other guys to get proper touches or comfortable rhythm with the ball all the time. So some guys do, like J-Dub looked great last night. That was the only reason the Thunder were in it for a long time. But, you know, once Chet's rhythm went away, like we saw what he withered into at the end of that game, Isaiah Hartenstein had, like, almost no offensive impact last night. I mean, name any other Thunder player, all of whom have had offensive impact at certain times. Like a game where Shai is slowed, they just didn't do as much, right? And so it is one thing to slow him down to the extent that you can. Like, I think he'll have several more 30-point games in this series. But it also just bleeds into everybody else in a way that was really meaningful last night.
Tony East is our guest. Locked On Pacers, Forbes, amongst the places where you can read and hear his work. He's on the Rhine Geist Brewery guest line. Tony, I thought last night was look, I'm not even afraid to admit this, okay? matter of fact, Tony, I'm going to let you be the first. I'm giving you the first opportunity to mock and make fun of me here, okay?
Okay.
Last night, at the end of that game, oddly, and it was almost like one of those feelings you get from sleep deprivation. It was actually emotional for me. I don't know if it's because I've grown up in Indianapolis. I don't know if it's because of just what the Pacers mean, not even as much to me as much as like people close to me, but it was just a special, special night. But at the same time, it's one of 4 that you need to get. And now, game 4, my worry is that high was so high that then there's going to be this inevitable crash. What does Indiana need to do differently in game number 4, or what does Oklahoma City maybe need to do differently in game number 4? Because I think if the Pacers win game 4, then we can start really starting to have that conversation. And you know what I'm talking about by that.
Yes, I do. I think 2 things are true. One is, yes, like, think about what you think of a series. Like, you win 1 game, it's like, okay, you won a game. Once you win 2, especially 2 in the first 3, I think every human being on the planet, it creeps in your head like, wait, like they could do it, right? Like that's, I think, where the emotional high came from for a lot of people last night. Is just that it's just human nature. You can't avoid it, right? And I think every player on the team will say on the record today, oh, no, we're focused on the task at hand. Like, come on, right? Like, it's inevitable that for everyone in that building last night, it hit them at some point. Like, they're halfway there with 4 games to go still in the series. So that is their new fight beyond focusing on the Thunder, who are an incredibly good team, is like the fight against themselves, right? To stay on track and stay focused. That's what I thought was so fascinating after they beat the Knicks. And that's why I think that they can overcome this. Is that the new NBA thing is they have these ceremonies after the conference finals, which I'm glad they do, because winning your conference is a big deal, even though there's like this rings culture thing with the NBA. But you go from celebrating with your fans and teammates and everybody's all psyched because you're going to the finals, and then immediately have to be like, oh yeah, we have another series, like a bigger deal than this, right? And the Pacers came out in game 1 of the finals and like, we're okay until the end, and then they were great at the end. But like, they managed those emotions pretty well, and I could see it. Like, I went in the locker room after they won game 6 against the Knicks, and they were like very focused and less celebrating than maybe I expected, and they were ready to go. And then look at that, they're up 2-1 in the finals. So I think they're prepared emotionally for this, even though, like, to do that in front of your home crowd. I mean, I actually wanted to ask you this because you were down low. I mean, I think that top and putback dunk was the loudest I've heard Gainbridge in my life. Would you agree with that?
Yes, and I will tell you this, Tony. When I say this, it's going to be – I'm embarrassed to say this, okay? I'm very lucky to sit where I sit. It has nothing to do with me. But sometimes the volume of the crowd is kind of, I hate to say it this way, like above where we are. Like, it's hard to hear sometimes how loud things are, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yes, I did get it.
Like when they review plays and they're announcing what they found in the review, like I can't hear any of that. I'm always like, what did he say? You know what I mean? And at the beginning of the game last night, there were times where I thought to myself, gosh, you know what? Oklahoma City's right. They are louder than this. And then because it wasn't a sustained volume. But there was a point last night, and I think it was the top and dunk. There was also a Neesmith 3 out of the corner.
Yeah, that put him up 8. Yep.
Those 2 moments. I mean, J.D. Spahn's a dude that I just know him because he sits next to me at the games, right? That's how we know each other. We're like jumping. We're like I think I lifted J.D. out of his seat. I think I picked him up and lifted. I mean, yes, it was. So yes, 100% yes. That was the loudest that I've heard it on numerous. And I would say the 2 loudest moments I've ever heard for Gainbridge Fieldhouse were both last night.
And I only ask you that to say, like, that's part of the emotion, right? Like, that is in the 3rd game of a 7-game series, right? So now they have to pack up, go home, be like, yay, we did it. Okay, now what, right? And then so how do you're sitting there with your iPad in bed as a Pacers player, like, how do you not think about that moment when everybody's going crazy and you realize you're going to win game 3, and then immediately have to be like, oh, yeah, we play on Friday, right? So that I just answered your question with a very long answer, but I think that's the next battle of the series is not Pacers Thunder, it's Pacers versus Pacers.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, tomorrow is just going to be so big. I mean, I love everything about it. The stars that were in the building, all of it. It was awesome.
Yeah.
Tony, in terms of your continued coverage, we will find that. And the next thing you were working on, aside from the obvious of Game 4, is what? We'll find it where, and you're working on what?
I'm writing about the details that made last night possible. I think there's some stuff that I saw and observed that people will find interesting. And then off to Game 4 and practices and all sorts of things. So it's the finals. It's how it is. It's a blast. There's always something interesting going on.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome stuff. Tony, appreciate it as always, and we'll see what happens tomorrow night at Gamebridge. Hopefully it's louder than it was last night, which was pretty darn loud. Much
right.
appreciated.
Thanks, guys.
All right, Tony
Yep.
East joining us, Ryan Geist Brewery guest line. We come back. I mentioned there was something weird that happened to me last night, and it took me about a quarter and a half before I realized it. But it was cool. I'll let you know about that. And interesting, some of the times, I think I was right about my bedtime observation or assumption. I'll answer that as well next. I think the best thing about last night, I'm actually going to – I'll tell you in a couple of minutes, actually. There was something that I mentioned two things that I saw last night that were they were special. It was a special night last night. And it was one that just you didn't want to necessarily go to bed because you just wanted to continue to soak in everything that came with it. Hey, Jake, I probably fell asleep around 1:30. Head to the pillow right before 1. Glee scrolling Pacer stories for another 15 to 20 minutes. Jake, I fell asleep at 2:10 a.m. Jake, it was easily after 2 a.m. watching the post-game interviews and decompressing from the game. Hey, Jake, Game 6 of the Knicks series, 3 o'clock in the morning. Game 1 of the finals, 2 o'clock in the morning. Game 3 of the finals, 12:15. Was so weird after Game 6 and Game 1. I was so exhausted from the stress last night, nothing was keeping me awake. That's interesting. Jake, I fell asleep at 3. I had to work at 6. I'm telling you, like almost everybody here, 1:32, 2:30, somewhere in there is when people fell asleep. But there was so much special about last night. It goes without saying. Reggie Miller being there at the game and sitting next to Oscar Robertson was special. All of the former players that were back in the building was special. I'll tell you, I was pleasantly surprised, I shouldn't say it that way, but at the ovation that Alex Pillow got when he was up on the video board. He got a large ovation. Edgerrin James there. There were so many parts of it that were special.
Terry Crews, Pacers fan.
Terry Crews, and I don't know that they even showed him on the video boards, but he was back after being here for the race.
I saw him on TV. I'm like, who's the big
buff,
dude?
Yeah.
Right there on the baseline. Or not baseline, but the sideline. It's like, Terry Crews, holy crap.
There were two things that I noticed last night that were really cool. Above and beyond the result of the game. And the result of the game was awesome, and we're going to celebrate it as a group next. But I'm going to tell you what makes sports so special and what made last night something that this city should be proud of for a long time. And it's something I noticed last night myself while I was glee scrolling, to say it that way. I'll tell you about that and what happened to me in the game that it took me a quarter and a half to figure out next.
and Company.
I'm going to be keeping you company for the next few hours.
You are not going to believe the company.
This company.
You're going to bankrupt your mama's company.
At least I have the radio to keep me company.
On 93.5 and 107.5, The Fan.
Nembhard sends it right sideline. Halliburton there against Dort. A long one on the way, and it's perfect from out near the right hash mark.
Siakam got it and lays it in.
How does he come up with that basketball? And look at T.J. McConnell.
T.J. McConnell with the steal. Siakam for three. It's no good. McConnell the rebound to Maturin, who lays it in.
And here comes Maturin. Right edge of the arc, slows and waits, gives it to Halliburton. Halliburton right edge, he wants three, and he's got three. We're under 9 minutes to play, the shot clock at 8. McConnell dances, spins, fumbles, picks it up, and can't finish in front. Rebound to the grateful Nembhard over on the left wing. It was tipped in his direction. He grabbed it and laid it in, and then McConnell steals, and the Pacers get 4 quick points in a matter of seconds. The game is tied with 8.5 to go. Driving the lane, Williams back to Holmgren, and Turner made him eat a three. Holmgren picks it back up with 3 to shoot, drives into traffic, and he lost it out of bounds. Miles Turner, with his 4th blocked shot of the night, made Holmgren swallow a 3 without chewing.
My goodness.
Here comes Halliburton, outnumbered, he slows and waits. Now drives forward with the left hand, floating to the glass. No, but Y-E-S, as Toppin pulled it off the front of the rim and flushed it with 2 hands. Halliburton using the Turner screen, driving to his left, cross-court pass to Neesmith, and he buries a cold-blooded 3 from the right sideline.
Falling out of bounds, contested, knockdown 3-ball.
The Pacers rallied and were able to finish this one off, 116 to 107.
It was a hard knock last night of reality for Jay-Z with the Pacers and the Oklahoma City Thunder, because courtesy of Indiana's win last night, you heard the calls there from Mark Boyle, Eddie Gill you heard as well, Chris Denary, more on that in a second. But Jay-Z wagered $1 million last night on the game.
Was that Robin the Genie?
And
did I just hear Robin?
That did sound a little like Robin, did it not? Jay-Z losing $1 million because he bet on Oklahoma City last night. Pacers get the win. Rick Geevers is a buddy of mine, really good guy. Rick is a very esteemed and known agent of media personalities. I've never had him as an agent, but I certainly know he's more of a TV side. And he is a St. Louis native. And Rick Geevers had emailed me, actually texted me, probably a week ago and said, hey, Jake, in St. Louis, when the Blues had their miracle run to win the Stanley Cup a few years ago, the radio play-by-play voice of the Blues had the wherewithal to allow the television guy for the Blues to do a period during that playoff run because he didn't obviously have a chance in the Stanley Cup final to do that. So Mark Boyle could do the same for Chris Denary. And I screen grabbed that. I sent it to Boyle and said, hey, this suggestion came from my friend Rick Geevers. It sounds like a pretty good idea. And Boyle wrote back and said, acknowledged. And then last night it came to fruition. So I thought it was very cool of Mark Boyle to take up. I'm not saying that was the genesis of him hearing of it. Maybe that had already been in the works. But for him to allow Chris Denary last night to do a quarter as well on the radio was very cool. And that's what part of why last night was so special is that's an example of it. But it's more than that. And I get the fact that the Pacers have bigger fish to fry. There is much more to accomplish here. They now are 2 wins away from an NBA title, and you try not to allow yourself to go too forward with that because they are going against a historically great team and an elite-level defense and a team with some dynamic scores for certain. There is a very big challenge still ahead for the Indiana Pacers. And I'm going to get into, and we're going to talk about some of the the basketball standpoint of that and breaking down the game itself and what happened, as we did in the first hour of the program. But there was something special that took place, and I wanted to share it with everybody. I noticed it last night. And this is why this is special, and this is why I hope everybody can soak in what's taking place. And I speak this to everybody. Okay? There is a listener of this show. I'm not going to say any names because I don't want to embarrass is the wrong word. But there is someone that I've gotten to know from just doing radio that's a listener of this show. And they are a newer resident to Indianapolis. And what I do know is that this person, part of the reason that they live in Indianapolis is getting to know this city via following sports teams in this city. And I know this. I know that, for example, I was fortunate to have the most idyllic upbringing that a kid could ask for. Last night, I'm going into the game, and I'm walking in, and I hear this, Jake, and I turn around, and there's Jason Keller. Not the Jason Keller that's the writer of television shows, but Jason Keller that I grew up with, who now lives elsewhere. And I think he's in Chicago now, but anyway, we grew up together. And I see him maybe once every couple of years, but we grew up together. He came back just to go to the game last night. And so here he is, my best buddy from 4th grade, and we're walking into the field house, and I'm like, oh, my gosh. And it was almost fitting that I'm walking in with them because what last night was, for the first time in 25 years, the NBA Finals taking place in Indianapolis, it was a celebration civically of who we are, right? And it was fitting that I would serendipitously run into the kid that I spent probably more elementary school days with than anybody. But I'm also smart enough to know that not everybody had that kind of an upbringing. And sometimes people turn to sports to escape what has been hard for them. And there's somebody, I'm scrolling last night, and I see a post from somebody who I know moved to Indianapolis because of an interest of sports, but also because life was such that they needed to get away from where they lived. They needed to get away from the things that they had to endure in childhood. They needed to get away from circumstances in life that were more unfair than any one person should have to deal with. So they came to a fresh start, and they chose Indianapolis. And still relatively new to Indianapolis, last night I saw this post on social media. God, these are the best nights of my life. What a team, what a city, what a win. These fans are the best. 2 more. This is our year. Go Pacers. The collection of people coming together to enjoy and embrace the euphoria that is created by a team aspect of sports is why we continue to talk about, follow, and feel passionate about sports. And while it may be the case in every city that a city collectively comes together to make somebody feel welcome that needed a fresh start and needed an embrace, maybe that happens everywhere. But I don't care about everywhere else. I care about Indianapolis because I grew up here. And to see that city last night, this city, when I was leaving the field house and people high-fiving, there was a guy in the street that was supposed to be directing traffic, but instead he was just chanting out Pacers in 5, and everyone was high-fiving him. No one was upset that he wasn't directing traffic because even the people in traffic were leaning out, high-fiving people. And the watch parties, and there is a reason why Reggie Miller was in the house and Jeff Foster was in the house. And I think somebody said Lance Stevenson was there, and C.J. McConnell, and all of these former players. There's a reason why these people are coming back and going to – or C.J. Miles, excuse me. There's a reason why former players are all coming back, and this city comes together collectively. And that's why this Pacers team is so special, because they themselves have that same spirit of a selflessness of just simply gathering together and saying, we might be 12 or 15 totally different people from totally different backgrounds, but we have a common purpose right now. And that's what we saw last night. And it was awesome. And I and everybody who was there watching it, everybody who was there in the viewing party, everybody who was packing the restaurants and the bars downtown, everybody who was watching at home should collectively pat yourselves on the back because, once again, this city shows the camaraderie that makes sports special. And it goes even above and beyond people that just simply live in Indianapolis in the moment. So I sit down at the game, and I sit down, and in front of me, there are 4 seats. And there's one guy who sits down, kind of a bigger guy, and he sits down, and I kind of looked, and I'm thinking, I think that's, but I don't think it is. Because the first thing the guy does when he sits down, he's wearing kind of an all, people in New York City or Los Angeles or Chicago, they always dress like an all black. It's a very kind of metro way of looking. And this guy was dressed in all black, and he's kind of a fashion type dude anyway. And he sits down, and I go, well, he's wearing the shirt. He's wearing the This Is Indiana shirt. So there's no way that's who I think it is. Because he's wearing the This Is Indiana. He literally put the shirt on, the free shirt. Like, I don't think Shannon even put the shirt on, right? She's waving it like a towel, but she didn't put the shirt on. So midway through the first quarter, into the second quarter, I finally thought, I'm just going to take my chance here and see if this is who I think it is. So I leaned forward to the guy, and I'm pretty certain he had taken a picture with the guy sitting next to him. But I'm pretty certain that this guy was by himself, just sitting by himself, drinking a Diet Pepsi, eating popcorn, and wearing the free Pacers shirt. And I leaned forward and said, is this like an obligation that you have to come to a Pacers game if you were once an Indiana high school all-star? And he laughs and says, well, I went to high school in Indiana. And I said, well, I know, yeah, that's what I just mentioned. You were on the 87 all-star team. And he goes, yeah. And I said, from Warsaw. And he said, yeah. And so that's how it came to be that I'm like, why would Rick Fox, who's won 3 NBA titles with the Lakers, including the Lakers team that beat the Pacers, Rick Fox, who was married to Vanessa Williams, Rick Fox, who was like best friends with Kobe Bryant, Rick Fox, who is still an actor and appears in stuff like fairly regularly and now is involved in esports and is a native of Nassau, the Bahamas, for crying out loud. Like, why would Rick Fox be at Gainbridge Fieldhouse for Game 3 of the NBA Finals between the Indiana Pacers and the Oklahoma City Thunder? And I do think that he did, like, maybe an appearance on ESPN before the game, but I don't think that was even designed. I think they just saw him and pulled him over because he's a guy that has 3 rings and has been a staple in NBA conversation since the last time the Pacers were in the NBA Finals. But at the same time, I think that there's an element of the fact that when you are a part of it, and he was from the Bahamas but was here as a high school student in Warsaw, there's something about Indiana that draws you back. And I don't think that you see that in every market. I just don't. I think it's unique. I think it's unusual. And last night, what we saw on the floor was that same spirit, because Benedict Mathurin was brilliant. He was brilliant. And Tyrese Halliburton was finally, again, aggressive and active offensively. And Pascal Siakam at the beginning of the game, Eddie, the beginning of the game, what did they go to Siakam? The first 3 possessions? 4?
That's what it felt like, yeah.
I think he scored, 6 of their first 8 or 10 points, did he not?
Yeah.
And so what that did was, by going to Siakam early, it then forced Oklahoma City to kind of drop back a little bit, and then all of a sudden Halliburton's getting going.
Well, I thought Halliburton was getting going by getting the ball to Siakam.
Well, yes. But what I'm saying is, offensively, in terms of Halliburton's shot,
yeah,
some of the threes that he hits, he hits the step-back pull-up 3, and Siakam is willing to say at the beginning of the game, guys, come to me. And then after that, once they started to open things up and get away from that, he's theoretically, seemingly, was okay with that as well. That's cool. And I mentioned it off the top of the show. I think Rick Carlisle played everybody here like a Stradivarius, because, including the people covering the game. Because after Game 2, Rick Carlisle sat there in Oklahoma City at the podium and said, well, listen, Shea is the kind of player that he's going to get when we get to Indiana, he gets 34 as soon as he gets off the bus. So what did I hear in that? What did the people sitting in the press row hear in that? What did presumably Oklahoma City hear in that? What they heard was, Shea's going to get his. We're going to have to limit everybody else. We're going to have to limit Jalen Williams. We're going to have to limit Chet Holmgren. We're going to have to limit Lou Dort. We're going to have to limit certainly, Caruso, any of those, right? And so with that, you go out there in that game, and then you realize, wait a minute, the Pacers defensively are putting Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in a box here. And they are limiting what he's going to do, and they're forcing him to turn the ball over. And the Pacers, while they are the team that through the first two games of the NBA Finals have seen that, as I call it, car wash defense. I know I use that term all the time, but it's the best analogy I can think of when you're going through the lane. The Pacers were the ones that became that. It was the Pacers that set a defensive tone. It was the Pacers that were the one slapping the ball away. Oklahoma City did it early, but Indiana eventually was making life difficult on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and then you realized, you know what? The numbers are in their favor. If Holmgren gets 17 to 20, and as well if Williams gets his 17 to 20, if Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is never able to get in rhythm, then Indiana is able to keep them at bay for the better part of this second half, and that's exactly what happened. They, on the wing, when Gilgeous-Alexander would get the ball, and listen, they do a phenomenal job, do Nembhard and Nesmith, in matching with him. But Siakam was right there. They basically almost went like it was like a box and three defense, where they boxed Gilgeous-Alexander and then let everything else flow. The last thing that they did was they basically said, we're going to play a high-low defense. Up high, we're going to box in Gilgeous-Alexander, and down low, we're going to either drop down or slide over and make life really miserable for Chet Holmgren. And Holmgren did have flashes where he came in from the wing, but more often than not, when he got the ball on the low block or he tried to get to the basket, that car wash was there waiting on him. And they slapped the ball loose from him. They forced him to have to then go back to the basket and maneuver around, and everywhere he turned, there was a box on him as well. And say what you want about Miles Turner, who we now know is battling illness, and that might have affected his effectiveness last night, but when it mattered most, he made life miserable for Chet Holmgren and totally disrupted what Holmgren wanted to do, what Oklahoma City wanted to do. And you had Ben Shepherd keeping loose balls alive and hitting two shots, right? Two shots, but timely shots.
Mm-hmm.
And when Nembhard got in foul trouble and Shepherd comes in, you didn't feel like there was a huge drop-off. And you had Obi Toppin getting the crowd involved, finishing on that dunk, bouncing the ball off the glass to keep it alive with block shots. You had Maturin, who was spectacular. And then you had T.J. McConnell. T.J. McConnell has something about him that you cannot coach, you cannot buy, you cannot teach, and that is this weird ability to know exactly when a team needs energy. T.J. McConnell's nickname should be Tesla, because it's like you plug him in and then he just goes on autopilot. And he brings like this battery jolt of energy to the floor. And he's stealing inbound pass. He had 5 steals last night.
3 on inbounds.
Yes. And 2 of them he scored off of, right? Or one of them, I think, actually, he missed the one he scored off of. One of them, I think they swatted the ball back, came back the other way. But
there was one that he passed out to Pascal. He missed the 3. Then TJ got the offensive rebound.
That's what it was.
And sent it to Maturin for the layup. And then there was another one where it was the end of the game in the fourth quarter.
And it was an automatic.
And Caruso was like, I'm just going to throw this ball in. No, here you go.
How do you lollygag? I've said T.J. McConnell, and I'm going to say this 100 times. He understands angles better than anybody in the history of the game of basketball. I kid you not. Like, he just knows what angles to work. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is very good at that as well in terms of that slipperiness of knowing when to go side to side and diagonally to get where you need to go to operate your comfort zone. McConnell does that in terms of anticipating the angles that the basketball or other people are going to try to maneuver. And he did it last night flawlessly. And my point is simply this. All of that collectively, all of those players collectively, that is a culture. And that's the most it's my least favorite word in sports because every single team that you talk to says they have culture. Everybody says they have culture, and hardly anybody does. Everybody says they have chemistry. Hardly anybody does. Guys can sit there and say, I just want to do what it takes for my team to win. Okay. Until they go out on the floor, and then they do what it takes to get theirs. This team does not. This team is like this city and that arena last night where collectively everybody quit worrying about their own individual interest, and everybody was there for one common thing and one common interest. And it's why people who aren't even from here feel a part of it, because we embrace it. And it's why people who had a fleeting moment of living here at one time come back, because it still reminds them of what's special and unique. And the Pacers get all the credit in the world for understanding and doing. You know, one thing that the Pacers do, and I know every franchise does this, but you know, the Pacers have scouts that are beyond just game scouts. Yes, the Pacers have scouts that go to college games and watch college players, or go to international tournaments and watch international players and watch how they play the game of basketball. You know the other kind of scouts they have? They have personnel scouts that if they are looking at a particular player that's already in the league, they have people whose job it is to go and witness that player and watch that player and watch games and see how they interact in timeouts and see how they interact with their teammates and talk to people that are around that franchise to try to get information as to what kind of people they are. And you don't make a trade for Obi Toppin from New York to come here as a former college player of the year. You don't make that trade unless you have done your proper vetting scouting to know this is a guy that, even though he entered the NBA probably thinking eventually he'd be a 25-10 guy, this is a guy that is perfectly comfortable and happy with doing what he needs to for the better good of a team. Not every player has that, and not every franchise recognizes it. I can show you a long list of franchises in the NBA that are stuck where they are because they assumed guys had that, and those guys were me-first guys. And last night when you were leaving the field house and people are high-fiving strangers in the street and people are honking their horns and nobody cares how long it's taken to get out of there because you didn't even want to go to bed. All of that is put together and facilitated by a crowd that mirrors the team and a team that mirrors the crowd. And that's why this is so special. And that's why you almost don't want it to end, except for you do want it to end, because for it to end, they have to win 2 more games, meaning they're the NBA champs.
What's the over-under on percentage of people working tomorrow?
Shh, boy.
It's Friday and it's a game day.
I mean, the weather's not supposed to be great, so maybe people do, but I mean, yeah. And if I'm telling you, tomorrow is so massive. We're in that transition between celebrating what happened and then preparing for tomorrow and not like getting too big this hangover from it. Tomorrow is so incredibly massive. But I want to know your thoughts on it, because I want people as a city collectively to be able to embrace, celebrate, and enjoy this moment. So we'll do it on the other side. 239-1070, 239-1070 is the telephone number. Let's be joyous for a segment, shall we? And celebrate the Pacers now halfway there. 2 wins, 2 to go, 2 home games left. And now it comes down to essentially a best of 4. And Oklahoma City's got to win 75% of those to deny Indiana. Let's discuss it all and celebrate next. I did say to Rick Fox, as we're sitting there, I go, hey, I used a little program thing. It's got an ad in there for the radio station.
Hey, that's me.
What's that?
No,
Well,
that's what you're saying. Hey, this is me.
It doesn't have our photos anymore in it, but it just says, so I said, hey, see this right here? And I pointed to him. I said, this is actually where I work. And I said, I have no idea what the odds are of this, but what are the odds that you'd want to come on radio in Indianapolis and just talk about, like, kind of break down the game? Because Rick Fox, I think, would be a good person to break down because, you know, in winning 3 NBA titles with the Lakers, excuse me, he was drafted by the Celtics, but in winning them for the Lakers, you know, he was not Matherin, but, you know, he was like an Obi Toppin. I mean, or Neesmith. He was a role player for them that was a complimentary piece, but a very good one.
Ben Shepherd?
Yeah, Ben Shepherd, you know, and he goes, yeah, I'll do it. Sure. And he said, well, hang on just a second. So he gets his phone out, right? And he has his phone, and he says, I'm flying tomorrow, so let me look. And he's showing me his itinerary. And he said, I'm flying to the Bahamas. Well, he's a native of the Bahamas, right?
Yeah.
And so I said, oh, okay. And
so
he
is
said,
Shavano healed?
And what's that?
So is Shavano healed?
And I said, you know, you went to high school in Warsaw, but you're a native of the Bahamas. Why not Warsaw to hang out instead of the Bahamas? And he kind of laughed and said, I have business down there. But he said, here's my itinerary. Here's what time I land. And he goes, why don't you just text me and we'll just figure out a time? I said, okay. So he's in the air right now. I think he's landing right now. But he gave me his number, and I'm like, here you go. So we'll see if Rick Fox comes on to explain how much he enjoyed his popcorn and his free T-shirt.
How about Big O and Reggie sitting next to each other?
Which is awesome, right? And I have done my soliloquy during the All-Star game about the history of Crispus Attucks High School and Oscar Robertson. But Oscar Robertson is, with all due respect to others, Oscar Robertson is the greatest basketball player from Indianapolis, and I believe people don't realize Oscar Robertson in 1960 was as far ahead of the game versus his peers as Michael Jordan was in 1990. I mean, he was unquestionably the greatest player of his era, in my opinion. Wilt Chamberlain obviously is a great player.
Yep.
But Oscar was, and still is, special and an absolute gem. And Reggie Miller wearing the Mark Jackson jersey, I don't know if that's because, was Mark Jackson replaced on the ESPN broadcasts?
Yeah, him and
I wondered if that
Van
was
Gundy.
I wonder if that was a shade.
Probably not. I don't think so.
I mean, I know that he loved playing with Mark Jackson, but Andy joins us at 239-1070 to talk about last night and the game itself. Hi, Andy. How are you?
Hey, how are you? I'm pretty stoked.
Andy, what time did you go to bed?
About 1 o'clock.
Okay, not bad. Not bad.
Yeah, I had to go over on YouTube to the OKC podcast and listen to piss and moan.
and now let me ask you this, because I don't think there's a lot of ill will necessarily between Oklahoma City and Indiana. Maybe a little bit last night after the Neesmith foul that they ruled was not a flagrant. But what was the mood in Oak City?
Well, I think they expected that it was going to be like maybe 5 game stops. Right. That's the feeling that I got from it. But yeah, it's I did it to New York, and that's what got me going on it. Because there's all kinds of crying towels on that side.
Yeah, you wonder if it doesn't become, at minimum now. I mean, what we know is this. I mean, it's guaranteed to go at least 6, right? And it's going to be tough for them to probably win a game 6 here, but we shall see. But you also wanted to talk Ben Matherin, correct?
Yeah, 2 things. I think if the Pacers win this finals, I think it would be a bigger accomplishment than the Super Bowl, because we only came in here with Mr. Overrated, and Colts had all kinds of weapons. But also with Matherin, do you think he maybe hurt himself in his starting position again?
Okay, great question on that, Andy. And with Matherin, I would say probably not. I mean, because, first off, one game does not a position change make, right? But I also think that Matherin he's a little bit of like the Vinnie Johnson type, where there's a weapon in being able to bring in that offense off the bench where you least expect it. And I think last night. Now, Bill Simmons, do we happen to have that audio, Eddie? I'm not a fan of Bill Simmons per se. I don't dislike him. I've never really – I used to really enjoy his writing, and then it kind of became just the same thing over and over. But Bill Simmons, and we have verified this, correct? This is unbelievable. I'll give all credit in the world here to Bill Simmons. This is not something that was put together as like some sort of a retroactive hoax. This is legit, apparently. This was Bill Simmons talking after, I believe, Game 2 on Sunday night, correct?
I don't know when it was, but I know it was prior to last night.
Prior to last night, Bill Simmons had this to say about the Pacers and the forecast of what may help them in this series.
I thought Maturin seemed athletically comfortable in this game. And I'm intrigued by what his upside is for them because OKC is so fast and so athletic, and they're just at warp speed. And I just thought he looked comfortable in the chaos in a way that I'm wondering, are we going to hear from him in this series? With one of those games, when Maturin will have those games where he's like, he scored 27 points in 22 minutes.
Eddie, can you do me a favor and pull up the Pacers box score from last night?
I got it up right now.
How many minutes did Benedict Mathurin play?
Let's see here. Benedict Mathurin, 22.
What did he shoot from the floor?
Let's see. Field goals, 9 of 12. Threes, 2 of 3. Free throws, 7 of 8. So
how many
looking
points?
At totaling up. Let's see. Pull out, carry over the 1, carry over the 2. Oh, 27.
27 points in 22 minutes.
Bingo.
If I was Bill Simmons, I would trademark that. 27 points, 22 minutes. That would be absolutely like my. And let me tell you something. Trademarking ain't easy, but that I would absolutely bang that drum to anybody that would listen forever that I made that prediction. Bill's up next. And by the way, no, I don't think Mathurin goes into the starting lineup. I think that he stays where he is because of the wrinkle that he can create. Hi, Bill.
Hey, how you doing today, Jake?
Bill, listen, man. 2 more to go, right?
2 more to go. I've got to get 1 more. Well, the only game that matters is the next one.
That is the perfect way of saying it. Now, my question for you is this, Bill. Game 4 is going to – I mean, we knew how tough last night was going to be, and I thought the Pacers, that might have been their best overall team performance in quite some time. Do they have it in them to do it again?
Yes. Yes, and until NBA coaches figure out that, oh, by the way, if T.J. McConnell's hanging around the inbounds line, there's a good chance he's going to steal the ball. Even this guy can't figure that out. They haven't been able to figure it out all year.
It is that is unbelievable, isn't it? I thought Bill, Derek Schultz, and I appreciate the call. Derek Schultz had a great point where he just said, you would think that the laissez-faire inbound passes would be taken a little more seriously when you're going against the guy that's the most elite inbound pass stealer in the history of the NBA. Derek tweeted that last night as a great point. Mel. Hi, Mel.
Hey, Jake. Hey, how are you doing?
Join the party, Mel. I'm doing well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited. I enjoy your show. I'm 87 years old, and I love your historical about Indianapolis every day. I don't get a chance to call in, but if the Pacers win, I will have got a trifecta. My daughter was a cheerleader for Broad Ripple High School, and we won the state championship.
In 1980, right?
That's right. And then I'm alumni from IU, and if the Pacers win it, I've got them all.
But now let me ask you this, Mel. So you would have seen not 1, not 2, but 3 ABA titles for the Pacers as well.
Oh, yeah, I was a season ticket holder.
Would this,
at the Coliseum.
And I mean this is no disrespect at all to Slick and Neto and Mel Daniels and Roger Brown and all of them, right? Billy Keller and McGinnis. Would this be, I hate to say more special, but how would this compare in terms to the love affair of the ABA Pacers?
Well, that's really kind of hard to say. I thought you were going to say something like, how would I feel when the Colts won the Super Bowl, because I was in Miami when I saw that. But this is going to be right up there, right with it. Most exciting thing in the world, just seeing them win this championship. I would love it, because I thought they had a chance. I thought they had a chance with Reggie, and Rick Smith.
Well, they did. I mean, they got there, but they fell 2 games short, right? Now they're 2 games away. Mel, here's the thing. All I know is this. If they were to win it, I want you celebrating the same way you did when Stacey Turan hit that 3/4 court shot in 1980. It was one of the great shots in Indiana high school history. All right, we'll round it out here real quick with Matthew. Matthew, what's up?
Hey, Jake. Not much. Just enjoying my off day.
Now, you were at the game last night, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I need a 1 to 10 scale. How loud was it? 1 to 10 scale.
10.
Okay. What time did you go to sleep?
1:45 this morning.
Okay, that's not terrible, right? Like, so did you have extra energy? Did you have extra juice?
Oh, yeah. I went home and went for a damn walk. It was 12:30 in the morning.
All right. Well, I like it. Now, here's the other thing, Matthew, because if I'm not mistaken, you got a ticket just by going online during when they went on sale, and you bought a ticket, right?
Yep.
And you bought 1 or 2 of them? Did you just one game, or are you going to game 4?
No, just one. I'm only so rich.
Well, listen, it's you and everybody else, right? That's a heavy item, man. No question about it. But I know you enjoyed it. It was awesome. I'm glad you went for a walk at 12:30 and burnt off the extra energy, okay? But I love everything about it. And it was a special evening, no question about that. Absolutely no doubt about it. By the way, we should let you know of something that happened on West 56th Street, not related to the Colts, because I saw something earlier today that was of interest to me and I think a lot of people about the Colts. And I'll tell you what that is on the other side. Okay, this is probably premature of me to say, okay? But the Colts are amidst, obviously, they are concluding their practice days. They did 11 on 11 drills today, okay?
Mandatory minicamp?
Yes. So Kevin Bowen was out there. And it's interesting that Desmond Ridder, we talked about that. Like, that was the name that when he was coming out into the draft, I remember saying, like, I think the Colts could take a look at Desmond Ridder at quarterback. But with Daniel Jones, you have Anthony Richardson sitting out the camp with the shoulder injury, obviously. Mm-hmm. Kevin Bowen today, and you can obviously find Kevin's work on the X-Post Twitter, and then his articles at 1075thefan.com. His latest observations from camp, he says Daniel Jones was solid. Nothing too flashy, but a pretty consistent in-rhythm, on-target thrower learning a new offense. The Colts had a shorter practice, just 11 on 11 period today among the starters. He went 3 of 4 completing passes to Pittman, Alec Pierce, and Tyler Warren. Now, I get it. I mean, it's kind of absurd to start tabulating stats this time of year and analyzing them. But I think in Daniel Jones, what you have is a rhythm passer that also does have athleticism to run the football. And do I think that Daniel Jones is a take-you-to-the-next-level quarterback? No, I do not. But I do think that Daniel Jones is one that showed flashes in New York that were intriguing and merited further examination and scrutiny. And in addition to that, that got him a big contract. And then obviously that big contract was such, when I say examination and scrutiny, I mean that earlier in his career, he showed enough that New York was like, this is worth examining whether or not he's going to be a long-term guy. And they thought he was. So they gave him a big contract. Then that contract, he didn't play up to that contract, but his personnel around him also changed. I'm not saying that I think he's going to be this is the guy that's going to lift us player. But Shane Steichen wants to win and needs to win. And assuming that he has autonomy of who, personnel-wise, he puts out on the floor, I think that you look at somebody like Daniel Jones and say, that gives probably Shane Steichen a better chance to win. Then Daniel Jones went on to say that now the next thing that he's going to do is he plans on getting together and working independently with all of the pass catchers for the Colts and working the offseason. What did the Pacers do in the offseason? They all went down to Pascal Siakam's place where he has a basketball facility and worked out as a team. What did Peyton Manning do in the offseason? He went down to Miami and he worked with Edgerrin James and Reggie Wayne and worked out. Peyton Manning, even when he had his surgery, I think, got together with Reggie Wayne. What did Andrew Luck do? I'm not saying Anthony Richardson hasn't done those things, but Daniel Jones is saying and acting the part of a starting quarterback. And I'm going to go, again, I'm going to stand by this. I said it a month ago, and I'm still going to say it right now. And there is still a lot to be done between now and then, and a lot to be had between now and then in training camp and everything else. But I'm going to predict right now on this, what is today, June 12th, 13th? 12th. I'm going to predict right now on June the 12th of 2025 that when the Colts season begins, barring injury, that week 1, Daniel Jones will be the starting quarterback of the Colts. I truly believe that.
I don't think that's any question anymore, Jake, with Richardson being out.
Right.
And there's not really a timeline on his return.
Well, I mean, the timeline, quote unquote, is that he's going to be, that he would be ready for camp, right? Can we believe that?
I don't know. It's hard to believe. And I said this way back when they brought Daniel Jones in and officially signed him. And I thought I got some pushback on this from people via text. And in the YouTube chat and on Twitter, if you look just at Daniel Jones's experience in New York, like, Jake, can you even name one receiver that Daniel Jones had?
Exactly.
Can you, other than Saquon Barkley, can you name one other player?
And Barkley wasn't there either, right?
That was competent at the NFL level or even average. Like, I mean, Darius Slayton, solid player, but he didn't have the pieces that he has around him. He never had an offensive line. The one year that he had a semi-competent offensive line and a healthy Saquon Barkley, they went to the playoffs and they won a game in Minnesota. And that's in New York, where you're coming off of the Eli Manning era, and you have to be the one that's replacing Eli Manning. You're dealing with the New York media. Now you're in Indianapolis. You're much more under the radar. And you've got Shane Steichen. You've got Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman Jr., Josh Downs, A.D. Mitchell, Tyler Warren, Alec Pierce. Like, you have the opportunity to succeed here, and I think that's been the common baseline for, the rejuvenation of some of these careers, like Baker Mayfield. He goes
I think Darnold. Somebody just texted me and they said they want to see. They're hoping for a Darnold-like resurrection. I think that's a fair. You'd be happy with that, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. And I'm not saying that Daniel Jones is going to be a franchise level quarterback, but he could be a quarterback that you can win with.
Here's the only problem. Problem's the wrong word. Let's say Daniel Jones, and I'll use the term that kids use. Let's say he balls out, right? Is that the right word?
Yes.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
That sounds wrong, doesn't it? It sounds inappropriate.
You did it right.
I know, but that doesn't sound, it sounds like there could be some danger there. Like you need blurs from Naked and Afraid or something. But nonetheless, let's say he has a big season. What's the ceiling of wins for the Colts?
I'd have to fully look at the schedule again.
But just off the top of your head, when you look at the roster and you think about the overall, you think about like the personnel that they have. What's the overall? What's your gut on with solid quarterbacking play? What's their ceiling on number of games they could get?
11.
So if they're 11-6, right?
18 games, right?
Is it 18 yet?
Oh, no, it's 17 still. Yeah. They're going to 18, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right. But so 11-6, right?
Yeah, 18 weeks, 17 games. Get together, Eddie.
So they go 11-6, and that means that would that win them the division?
I think it would.
Okay. So they win the division. They get into the playoffs. What do they do at the playoffs?
By the way, Vegas has them at 7.5 right now. I think 11 is like the top that you get to.
But my point being this, they win the division. I mean, that's cool. They get in the playoffs. They would take on, they're probably at 11-6. They take on who in the first round, right? Like you
would probably take on the best wild card team.
The Chargers, right?
Chargers or, one of those AFC North teams.
Yeah, it's not going to be Pittsburgh, right? Baltimore, right? Baltimore, Cincinnati.
Yeah.
So and then you lose and you draft 19th. Rinse and repeat. That's the problem. The problem is in the NFL, you either go for bust or you recycle back to ground level. And when you do that, you go after your quote-unquote franchise quarterback. And it's a really tough thing to have to spit yourself right back into that cycle within a 4-year window of when you were last in it. Now, maybe that's better than just trying to draw it out, but still, that's certainly the challenge there, right? But I think at this point we can safely say that about Jones. You know what I mean?
The one thing that they have to do, though, when it's Daniel Jones starting, is they've got to be able to sustain drives offensively so the defense doesn't wear down like it did last year. Like, there are still question marks on the defense just because you've got new defensive coordinator and a lot of new pieces. Like, defense should be better than last year, should force more turnovers. Can you get to the quarterback?
Well, you saw one of the players that we thought perhaps they would be in the running for has signed with the Raiders, right?
Yeah, Jermaine Pratt.
And I don't know, who knows how much interest there was in that regard.
Wonder if it came down to a guaranteed spot, playing time, and a little bit more money. Depends on the guarantees, stuff like that.
I hope I'm wrong, but I worry that you get yourself into that vat, right? I think Jones is intriguing, but I worry that it gets you into that vat. Pacers big win last night, but it comes with a proceed with caution. We'll get into that next.
It's Query and Company.
I'm going to be keeping you company for the next few hours.
You are not going to believe the company.
This company.
You're going to bankrupt your mama's company.
At least I have the radio to keep me company.
On 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Nembhard sends it right sideline. Halliburton there against Dort. A long one on the way, and it's perfect from out near the right hash mark.
Siakam got it and lays it in.
How does he come up with that basketball? And look at T.J. McConnell.
T.J. McConnell with the steal. Siakam for three. It's no good. McConnell the rebound to Maturin, who lays it in.
And here comes Maturin. Right edge of the arc, slows and waits, gives it to Halliburton. Halliburton, right edge. He wants three, and he's got three. We're under 9 minutes to play. The shot clock at 8. McConnell dances, spins, fumbles, picks it up, and can't finish in front. Rebound to the grateful Nembhard over on the left wing. It was tipped in his direction. He grabbed it and laid it in. And then McConnell steals, and the Pacers get 4 quick points in a matter of seconds. The game is tied with 8.5 to go. Driving the lane, Williams back to Holmgren, and Turner made him eat a three. Holmgren picks it back up with 3 to shoot, drives into traffic, and he lost it out of bounds. Miles Turner, with his 4th blocked shot of the night, made Holmgren swallow a 3 without chewing.
My goodness.
Here comes Halliburton, outnumbered, he slows and waits. Now drives forward with the left hand, floating to the glass. No, but Y-E-S, as Toppin pulled it off the front of the rim and flushed it with 2 hands. Halliburton using the Turner screen, driving to his left, cross-court pass to Neesmith, and he buries a cold-blooded 3 from the right sideline.
Falling out of bounds, contested, knockdown 3-ball.
The Pacers rallied and were able to finish this one off, 116 to 107. Yeah!
Boom, baby! Boom, baby!
So that's how it sounded last night. Mark Boyle, on the call. Pacers Radio Network, Eddie Gill there as well. You heard Slick. You heard Chris Denary as well, because Mark, realizing that, of course, the television team doesn't get the chance to do the games, allowing Chris Denary to do a quarter last night. Eddie, you pointed out Chris Denary was good luck, right?
That's right, Jake. The Pacers struggled in that first quarter, and then they turned the mic over to Chris Denary for quarter number 2. Next thing you know, look at that. 40 points, and they're in the lead at halftime.
So the Pacers now are 2 wins away from an NBA title, but it's not going to be easy, and we know that. I mean, it's the finals, right? This is different than having Atlanta down in round 1 or something like that. But I thought last night what was just particularly, Eddie, interesting was there was an element of, it felt to me like the Pacers kind of beat Oklahoma City at Oklahoma City's game last night.
And I still didn't feel like they played a complete game last night either.
See, I'll respectfully disagree in that. Enlighten me on which part you would say they did not have completion.
See, I thought in the third quarter, in like the final couple of minutes there, they made some bad decisions that they typically don't make, turning the ball over, committing silly fouls, sending Oklahoma City to the line, and letting Oklahoma City hang around even though they weren't shooting it great. And large part of their offense in the third quarter was at the free throw line between Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Jalen Williams, and then they let Jalen isolate Aaron Neesmith, and Neesmith is sagging too far off of him, so he hits him for a 3, and I thought the game was, oh no. I literally said, oh no, when Jalen Williams hit that 3 at the end of the third quarter and kind of silenced the crowd going into the fourth. And then they kind of made the right plays in the fourth quarter, but I still felt like there was a collection of plays that you could have looked back at and be like, see, this is where they lost the game because of this sequence here. And I thought they played great in the second quarter. They didn't play well in the third quarter, but they did play well in the fourth. So from start to finish, I don't think they've played an entire complete game just yet, but I do think they're on the right path. And yesterday was closer to them playing a complete game than any other game they've played in the series, obviously.
I thought, to me, look, there were so many things about last night that were special. And we can sit here and talk about, and by the way, Eddie, I love your shirt.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I heard people yelling. Matter of fact, as I was leaving last night.
I think it's cool seeing the little TM down there in the corner.
The trademark?
Yeah.
Heck yeah. Why not Indiana, baby?
I saw, was it Barstool IU, Barstool, Indiana, that said it, and you quote tweeted it? It's a trademark, not for usage.
That is correct. If you want to, I heard people in the streets saying it to me last night.
Out in the streets, as you would say, right?
Why not Indiana? That's right. I thought last night was a complete team win, and I say that because of every player that stepped on the floor contributed in some way. And
I will give you that.
They did so in such a way, and I'll repeat what I said earlier. There's a selflessness about this team that's different. You know, certain teams, and I don't want to jinx anything. I mean, I'm knocking on wood as loud as you can knock on wood. But there's something to be said. There are certain teams that you watch, and it's almost inexplicable when they make a run towards a title. The Anaheim Angels, the year that they had what do they call it, the rally monkey?
Sure.
There was just something like magical about it where it was like, holy cow, this team just won't go away. The Kansas City Royals, like 10 years ago. Just timely hitting and this middle relief bullpen. You're like, what in the world am I witnessing here? Toronto, to be honest with you, with Kawhi Leonard and Pascal Siakam. And Oklahoma City is a great team. There's no doubt about it. They are fabulous defensively. But and they obviously have elite scoring as well, led by Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. But the one thing that I keep going back to is I wonder if Rick Carlisle didn't, play all of us. Because I mentioned this earlier. After Game 2, Carlisle, when asked about preparing for Game 3 and coming back to Indianapolis, he said, look, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is going to get 35 when he gets off the bus. I think he said 34. 34 when he gets off the bus. And so all of us, myself, I'm assuming the guys in the morning, John, any national talking head, all of them, they all said or assumed, maybe it wasn't said, but we all assumed what he meant by that was, Gilgeous-Alexander is going to get his. You've got to limit then everybody else. That's what it felt like, right?
You got to limit the Aaron Wiggins, the Alex Caruso's.
Correct. And last night,
Isaiah Joe.
The Isaiah Joe hit back-to-back threes at one point, and I thought, okay, come on, what are we doing? But what I witnessed last night was a bait and switch because the Pacers almost prognosticated one thing and then went out and did something completely different. And what they had kind of predicted was, or forecasted was, that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was going to control offensively the tempo, and you then had to make sure that you let him get his and you limit everybody else. And instead what they did was they basically boxed him in on the wing and made life difficult for him. Halliburton had a really good answer in the post-game press conference where he was asked about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and he said he's really slippery. And I think that's the best way he moves, does Shai Gilgeous-Alexander like a serpent.
I was going to say he slithers like a snake.
He does, because he doesn't move in a straight line. He moves, he's like Kubert.
So his spatial awareness is probably the best in the league.
Correct. And what Indiana did last night was they limited that space where he couldn't move because they didn't just ISO on him. Nembhard and Nesmith are both outstanding in guarding him. But they moved basically to the point where he would have and was aware of the face-to-face one-on-one coverage he was getting, but then they would get a double overhelp, and he was boxed in. He was boxed in 18 feet from the basket. The other thing that they did remarkably well was because there were times where Oklahoma City did try to take advantage, for example, of Holmgren flashing in from the wings or things like, or getting the ball into the interior, predominantly to Holmgren, and then obviously Williams would occasionally either hit a three or a mid-range shot. But late in the game in particular, they frustrated Chet Holmgren so much. He had a look on his face. With a couple of minutes to go in the fourth quarter, they substituted Hartenstein back in for Holmgren. And as Holmgren was walking off the floor, he looked completely deflated and defeated. Completely. Exasperated. And that was the first time that I had seen the Pacers in this series. I saw it against New York. I saw it against Cleveland. With Cleveland, what did I say when they were going back to Cleveland? After the Pacers had absolutely eviscerated Cleveland in game 4. Which one was it? Cleveland was it 5 games or 6 for Cleveland? It was 5, right? Yeah, it's 5. So after game 4, when they went back to Cleveland for a game 5, I had said Cleveland could be afraid of that plane. And by that I mean psychologically and mentally, I think it got in Cleveland's head like these guys just are not going away. And then the same thing happened with New York. New York got to the point where Jalen Brunson and the way that Nembhard hounded him in their elimination game, it wore them down, and you saw the Pacers pull away and their fresh legs win in the end. And last night, Oklahoma City, who was so good defensively and so athletic and so fast, that was the first time in this series that I saw Oklahoma City start to show some sort of a will. That doesn't mean it's permanent. I don't mean that they have thrown in the towel on the series by any stretch. That would be the dumbest thing ever said. And who knows? Oklahoma City is they are elite. They are a great, great team, and they have great players, and they are great defenders. But the level in which they defend was matched and surpassed by Indiana last night. And the Pacers came out and hit them in the mouth in the fourth quarter. And with 4 minutes to go, when there was a timeout on the floor, you had Caruso who got up and had to be ginger after a Nesmith foul. And you had Alexander who'd been knocked down that got up a few times. Holmgren that got knocked down a few times. And I think for the first time this season, a team that won 68 games, a team that has now won 80 of them in totality of the season, if you include the postseason, I think for the first time Oklahoma City tasted their own blood. That was it. They tasted their own blood, and they're like, what is that weird taste? What's that iron taste in my mouth? And we will see now how Oklahoma City answers to that. They may show the fortitude of why they are an elite historic team. Now, having said that, Eddie, what Indiana did was also showed their own mental fortitude in the fact that you've got to go back to what were you doing, Eddie Garrison?
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to know.
Okay.
Back when I was talking like the leprechaun for St. Patrick's Day.
Oh, jeez.
The favorite day of the year in the program.
Oh, jeez.
When I was doing that.
Yeah.
What did you do that night?
I honestly can't remember.
What did your St. Patrick's Day involve this year? Do you remember?
I don't know. I don't think the Pacers played, did they? On St. Patty's Day?
They did not. Just follow me here.
I can't recall.
It was that long ago, right?
Yep.
Nothing of note happened, right?
Nope.
But St. Patrick's Day, it feels like a long time ago, does it not?
Forever ago.
And you are correct. The Pacers did not play that day, right?
I don't think so.
No, they did not. Now, do you know why they didn't play that day?
No.
Actually, they did play that day.
Okay.
The Pacers. Sorry. They played at Minnesota. And they won.
That was that game where they were resting all their starters.
And they won.
That was the ridiculous Obi Toppin fourth quarter. He hits the shot from the corner to tie to send it to overtime, and then the Pacers win. That was kind of like the start of these miraculous comeback wins.
That game on St. Patrick's Day was a week after A week after the last time that they lost back-to-back games. That's how long ago it's been. Now, you want to talk about like a mental fortitude and a mental strength. The Pacers were facing it again and the very realistic option of losing back-to-back games. And they came out and answered like that. Now, I'm not saying that they can't lose back-to-back games still within this series, but the situation that they're in now is this. There are 4 games remaining in the season. 4. They go 50-50, they're NBA champions.
Wild.
They go 2-2 in their last 4 games, and the Indiana Pacers will become the first franchise in the history of professional basketball to be ABA and NBA champions. In this city, that I think there are a lot of people, Eddie, a lot, that had convinced themselves that this was something that they would never see. And it's not over. And I'm not counting chickens in any way, shape, or form. And Oklahoma City is going to answer. They're going to respond. You just have to naturally assume that, right?
You do. I do have a question about Oklahoma City, though.
Okay.
I mentioned it after game 1 that I felt like there was signs of fatigue in Oklahoma City down the stretch in the fourth quarter. Last night, they were gasping for wind with 4 minutes left.
I know.
And this is the only time during this series where there's one day between games. Is that going to be advantage Pacers just because of how exhausted Oklahoma City looked in the fourth quarter last night, and they don't have as much time between games to kind of recuperate from that? And you're seeing Shai Gilgeous-Alexander spend more time in the final minutes of games with his hands on his knees gasping for air than you do not?
I mean, you hope, right? But here's the thing. If you look like last night was a total team win because the players that carry Tyrese Halliburton was back to Tyrese Halliburton, and Pascal Siakam was aggressive offensively early in the game. But it was the contribution of Obi Toppin, T.J. McConnell. I thought Ben Shepherd played really well.
Yep.
McConnell only played 15 minutes last night. This is the big thing. If you look at, Wiggins only played 10 minutes last night. But Caruso played 32 minutes. Jalen Williams played 36. I'm talking about the guys that you think are going to be those that are the supporting cast to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Dort played 36.
Mm-hmm.
Holmgren played 35. The Pacers, in terms of the players that gave them good contribution, Toppin played 28. McConnell played 15. Matherin only played 22 minutes. Shepherd played 18 minutes. Nesmith only played 22 minutes. So theoretically, the Pacers are the ones that stand to be fresher in Game 4. Now, they absolutely have to win Game 4, and I anticipate that Oklahoma City is going to come out and they're going to make adjustments. They're going to get Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They're going to find ways to get him more open in space. The one thing that the Pacers did last night I thought really well was they increased the tempo to not then get caught in the half-court set and get stifled a little bit.
Yep.
And they determined the pace of the game. They dictated the pace of the game.
I thought they were much better defending screens, too. It felt like Oklahoma City was still screening further out away from the three-point line than the Pacers had seen in previous series. New York started to do it a little bit with Jalen Brunson just to get him going, and then Oklahoma City kind of mocked that to get Shai Gilgeous-Alexander going. And every time they did that, if it was not in the middle of the floor and it was on either wing, they were trapping Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and forcing him to make a decision with the basketball, and he was turning the ball over. Like, his 6 turnovers was the most in the game this season.
One of the things that you, Eddie, pointed out before this season began, and I thought it was a really good point, was you were curious as to how Oklahoma City was going to perform in crunch time, right?
Yeah.
Just in the biggest moment, in the biggest stage. And so far, Indiana looks more ready for that moment.
66 total minutes during the course of an 82-game season. 66 clutch minutes. Plus or minus, I think it's you're either losing or you're winning by 5 points in the final 4 minutes or 4 points in the final 5 minutes. It's one of those two.
And you're saying that's the total number that Oklahoma City played?
Yeah, like Washington was second closest, and they played like 88. That's because they were just so dog water. And then the third team was the
water.
Were the Lakers, who had like 120. So the fact that the gap between Oklahoma City and LA was like 60 minutes, that's absurd.
Do you think it's weird that Rick Fox was at the game, I think, just by himself?
No.
Like, I think he's just hanging out.
I had a buddy who flew up from Florida just to come and be a part of it.
So I sit down at the game, and a bigger guy sits down right in front of me. And he had on the Free Pacer shirt. He put it on, right? He put it on,
yep,
which is cool. And he sits down, and I'm like, I think that's Rick Fox. I'm not positive, but I think it's Rick Fox. And then we get like halfway through the quarter, and Shannon and her friend Linda Allen, they say to me, they're like, is that Rick Fox sitting in front of you? And I'm like, I think it, I mean, they said it kind of quietly. And I'm like, I think it is. So finally, and the guy next to him, and I don't know if Rick Fox was with him or if it was just a fan, but somebody took a picture with him, and he took a photo. And I'm like, okay, I think it is Rick Fox. And he was drinking a Diet Pepsi, like through a straw, with a thing of popcorn, just watching the game. And so I said to him, I go, look, does this mean because you were on the All-Star team for Indiana that, like, it's mandatory that nearly 40 years later you come back for an NBA Finals? I mean, you play the only other time the NBA Finals were in Indianapolis, you were here because you were playing in them as a Laker, and you won. And he says, oh, no, man, I went to high school in Warsaw. I'm like, well, yeah, of course. I mean, I know that, of course. And for those that aren't familiar, Rick Fox, who has, and I can't remember the exact circumstance that if he was a foreign exchange student or if his somehow or another, but he grew up in the Bahamas and he ended up living in Warsaw for high school. And during his high school years, he played for Warsaw and was a good enough player that not only did he get, a scholarship to North Carolina, but he also, in that capacity, made the All-Star team, but the IHSAA deemed him ineligible for his senior year. So he did not play as a senior, but was still on the All-Star team. At any rate, he's at the game last night. And I thought this would be the one thing that he did say is, and I later saw, I think he did like a pregame thing online for ESPN. I don't know if he was there for that capacity or they just happened to notice him there and brought him on. But he made the point of, and he would know this, that championship teams are often defined by what the role players or the players that are not used to being the stars, what they do in those moments. And last night, in no question, it was Toppin, McConnell, Matherin, and, I thought Shepard played well for them as well. But it was those, and Matherin, we need to get into that. Last night, Ben Matherin was all of us. And I say that a lot about different players on this team. But I'll explain what I'm talking about in the unlikely hero from last night, and I'll do it next. to begin having this sort of discussion. But last night, did Benedict Mathurin prove that he is, because, I think that there was a foregone conclusion to a lot of people, myself to an extent, where I would think to myself, look, Benedict Mathurin is a very, very good basketball player. There's no doubt. But my concern, especially during this run, has been that Mathurin seemed to offensively play in a style that was, with each day, seemed to be more and more a style that was different than what the Pacers wanted to do. And it just felt like he was the one player on a team of an incredible cohesiveness. He was the one player that, I'm not going to say went rogue, but felt like was just kind of the outlier. Not by personality, not as a negative about him as a person, but just the style in which he plays, which is more an isolated style. But this is, to be frank, the best analysis of this I can offer going into last night is that from Bill Simmons. And Bill Simmons is a guy that I know is a Boston guy through and through. I should respect the fact of how much love he has for his home city because I can relate to that. But he's not somebody that I have listened to nor watched a lot, because when he first hit the scene and I would read his stuff, I really liked it. And then after a while, it was kind of like, it felt like the same column, rinse and repeat over and over. And then there was just a smarminess. But he was talking about the Pacers after Game 2 Sunday night and had this observation, which is incredible. Here we go.
I thought Mathurin seemed athletically comfortable in this game. And I'm intrigued by what his upside is for them, because OKC is so fast and so athletic, and they're just at warp speed. And I just thought he looked comfortable in the chaos in a way that I'm wondering, are we going to hear from him in this series? With one of those games, when Mathurin will have those games where he's like, he scored 27 points in 22 minutes.
That was Sunday night. That was not Bill Simmons commenting that last night Ben Mathurin had 27 points in 22 minutes. That was Bill Simmons wildly predicting the possibility that he would have a game like that. And Ben Mathurin had exactly 27 points in 22 minutes last night. I mean, that's incredible. But above and beyond the clairvoyance of it is the observation of the fact that Mathurin is an athlete that enjoyed playing in the chaos that Oklahoma City creates. And whether or not the Pacers saw that and decided to put him in situation to take advantage of it, or perhaps simply the Pacers just said, we just keep doing what we're doing, and Mathurin saw that opportunity. The bottom line is that to win a championship, oftentimes you need games that are carried by somebody other than your star. And last night, the Pacers took the Oklahoma City Thunder star in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and corralled him into a box, and they did not have an auxiliary player that took over the game. Tyrese Halliburton was not put in a box by Oklahoma City, but Benedict Mathurin, as an auxiliary player, did kind of take over the game and certainly kept them in it. And it was the Mathurin game, right? Toppin made big plays. Shepard, I thought, was great. Eddie, you pointed out Nembhard was very good for them down the stretch with little plays, right?
Yes, I didn't think Nembhard had much of an impact on the floor in terms of, box score production. And then in the fourth quarter, he kind of figured it out like Indiana does in the fourth quarter. He has, an offensive rebound, and he's right there at the right place, right time, puts up the shot, makes the bucket, has a little step back jumper with Caruso chasing him down, knocks it down. And then in the fourth quarter, he was the one who secured the rebound, preventing it from going out of bounds, and then gets it to Tyrese, and Tyrese pushes it all the way up the floor into the hands of Siakam, and then effectively into the game with over a minute to go, not to mention his defense in the fourth quarter on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
But so it was collectively a great effort by everybody, but there's no doubt that Mathurin kept them in the game. Now, that raises the question of, Oh man, does Matherin become a starter now? Does Matherin look? He's a wild card for them that they can use for certain, and he could be that X factor guy. But I don't know that you see that again from Matherin in the series, only because Oklahoma City is going to probably adjust on that. I hope that Matherin doesn't, because he does have a tendency to put his nose down and get away a little bit from what they want to do offensively, and it worked last night for certain. He still feels like a guy that could be a piece that they are going to have to move, just at no fault of his, just based on the salary of, keeping this unit together. And he is certainly a piece that's now, and in particular, going to have an increased level of marketability. But he was great last night, and that was it. And kudos to him, and credit to him. And a lot of players whose minutes have gone down, a lot of players who their roles have not been defined per se in terms of finding a permanent spot of what they do or a consistent ability to do what they do, would sulk, and that guy never did. And it absolutely paid off big time for Indiana last night, and their patience on him probably to an extent paid off as well. Now the beauty of it is he's another guy that Oklahoma City has to keep in consideration when he steps out on the floor, and maybe that does, in fact, open things up and free things up elsewhere for the rest of the roster. It is so easy to get caught up in and get excited about and start counting down just exactly how they're going to get those 2 games. And it's 2 games left, Eddie. They need to go literally, if they go 2-2 in their last 4 games, they're NBA champions, and it's incredible. Am I jinxing things by getting too ahead of it and talking like that?
I don't think so. I think that's the optimistic mindset that you have to have, right? They haven't lost back-to-back games in
March
98 days.
It's crazy, right?
They have yet to trail in a series this postseason.
You're right.
Said it yesterday. The team that wins Game 3 wins the series 80.5% of the time when it enters 1-1.
I like these odds better, though. I like the odds much, much better of the percentage of times that teams win once they're up 3-1. Right?
I think it's 1% with 2 donuts at the end of it.
I like that those odds much better, unless Kyrie Irving and, obviously Kyrie Irving and LeBron have something to say about that, but I that's definitely what I prefer. Definitely what I prefer is up 3-1.
By the way, Jake Blake, Chris Daughtry coming back. Tickets to give away to go see him in Seether.
You will do it next?
The Everwise Amphitheater at the White River State Park.
All right, we'll do it next. Tickets to give away, 239-1070. Pacers celebration Thursday, up 2-1. John's in as well, and we will transition over to him, but we will give away tickets on the other side. So, Eddie, we have tickets to give away, correct?
Yeah.
Everwise Amphitheater at the
White River State Park. Yep.
Wednesday. Of our friends at Live Nation.
Wednesday, October 15th. Seether and Daughtry.
We have callers lined up. Is that right? Here's a good question somebody asked. If the series ended right now, which, it's not.
Okay.
Who would be the MVP for the Pacers?
Oh, gross. Is there even a certainty that a Pacers player would win MVP?
Yeah, I'm saying if the Pacers had won, if it was a best of 3.
Right. What I'm saying is, are you sure that they would have given the MVP to a Pacers player?
Yes.
You sure they wouldn't give it to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander?
No.
You don't think so?
No. It's a good question, though. Who was the last player to win Finals MVP on a team that did not win the Finals? I know the last to do it in the NCAA was Akeem Olajuwon, right?
Was it LeBron? Jerry West.
Was it Jerry West?
Jerry West, yeah, 1969.
Yeah, so there you go, right? But it would be...
Can't give it to Rick Carlisle.
Nembhard?
McConnell?
That's that's the beauty of this team, right?
Siakam?
Yeah, but he's had, he and Halliburton both have had ineffective games, right?
Siakam is the team's leading scorer in the first game, and then he had 21, 6, and 4 last night on 8 of 14. 2 steals and a block.
Right now, the NBA Finals most valuable player rankings, in terms of odds, it is still listed as Shai Gilgeous-Alexander first, Halliburton second, Jalen Williams third, Caruso fourth, Siakam fifth.
Now, is that just like a ranker, or is that like a sports book odds?
Yeah, odds. Nembhard is behind Holmgren, and then Miles Turner. Miles Turner, by the way, apparently is dealing with an illness, and that was perhaps what limited his effectiveness last night. Who do we have lined up for the tickets, Eddie?
We've got Drew, Chad, Chris, Raymond, and Colton.
And which one would you like to go with first?
Which one would you like to go with first, Jake?
It's not Colton Herta, I assume, right?
I don't think so.
We'll go with Drew since we were just talking about Andrew Nembhard. Drew, how are you?
Drewcifer.
I'm good. How are you guys?
Good. Drew, I'd like to know this. Did you go to the game last night?
I did not. I did not.
You watched the game, I assume, right?
I did.
Okay, game ended roughly 11:15. I'd like to know what time you actually went to bed.
Well, we had some family friends over as well to enjoy it and swim. So we around 12:15 at night.
Hell yeah, right?
Yes, late night.
Okay, now, Drew, answer me this. Riddle me this, if you will. On a 1 to 10 scale, and be honest, your level of Pacer fandom is in 2 different answers here. In terms of your lifelong fandom, and then in terms of your current fandom.
Current fandom, because of this season, I think it's energized a lot. I'd say I'm pushing an 8.
Okay.
Lifelong, I'd say close to a 6.
That's cool.
I'm more of a baseball fan, so.
Who's your baseball team?
I am a Yankees fan. Grew up idolizing Derek Jeter, but obviously being an Indy, I am a Reds fan.
Okay, that's cool.
As well, so I
Nothing wrong
kind of go with both.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. Just because when you said the Yankees, my first thought is that you were a bandwagon fan, right?
That's what a lot of people think.
And did you like Jeter because of his on-field or off-field prowess?
I liked him because of his on-field. Everyone wanted to be, the man. So the go-to. And I was also a big A-Rod fan as well. So my generation's athletes. Yes.
All right. Well, fair enough. Drew, what line of work are you in?
I am now used to be in law enforcement, now in private manufacturing.
Oh, private manufacturing, and you used to be in law. Okay, that's cool. Well, you're the director of private manufacturing for the company, and we will get you to go see the show coming up in October to see Hinder as well as, or Daughtry, excuse me, as well as, is it Seether? Is that right?
Yep.
I'm not as familiar with Seether, but certainly with Daughtry. All right, Drew, appreciate you listening to the program, and we will send you on about your way. That sounds like I'd like to hang out with Drew. Got a pool, television's near the pool, hanging out by the pool at night, having friends over. Let's go, right? And I'm telling you, I think a lot of people last night, and when I asked it earlier, what time did people get to bed? 2, 3 o'clock. It was tough. It was tough to get to bed after that game because it was just, I mean, you were just wired. And then after a game like that, you don't want to, like, you don't want to, like, go to bed and just have it all in because you want to hear more, you want to see more, you want to read more, you want to do all of it. J&B has arrived.
Hey, buddy.
You finishing up something to eat there?
Yeah, I am.
What are they got food out there?
No, protein bar.
What?
Okay.
Jake, he's already got to talk enough. I mean, he was on the air for like 9 hours yesterday. We should give him a break. Save that voice.
Man, it was limping to the finish yesterday, huh?
I know.
It was.
Hey, that you and I talked last night. What time did you finally get to sleep? Because I talked to you after the game last night as well.
No, it was pretty damn late. Hell, I don't even remember.
It was
it's
awesome,
funny,
right?
man. You'll love this. Todd and I, like, I wonder why Todd was giving me grief. Todd's our executive producer who's outstanding about yesterday. And then I realized I started the show. I said, you know, Todd had told me not to go play basketball on Tuesday night, and I decided against taking his advice, and I did it anyway. So that's why he was giving me grief. So now I understand. I was trying to think, why is Todd giving me grief today?
So you think that your being under the weather was accelerated by the fact that you did not give your body the proper rest, right?
No, I think actually I sweat a lot of that bull crap out, and that kind of helped. But yesterday was just a long day.
Miles Turner's feeling the same as you, right?
I know. Like twins, right?
And
did you guys, anybody check out my timeline last night and how all these knobs are lighting him up too? I just said this. I said he looks hesitant. And he looked slow. He looked a step slow to everything that was going on. So,
but you know what,
clearly
John?
there was something going on.
When it mattered most,
he was right there.
He made 2 big plays for them, man.
And some of these jackasses will never understand it. And I'm going to name them all today. Every last one of them, Jake, because that's what I do.
Okay.
Every last one. No, honestly, I'm glad that he hung in there. It was a struggle shooting the basketball, but late, he was right there. And honestly, you saw it firsthand. OKC was gassed there at the end.
Totally.
Holmgren was beyond gassed.
And he looked – here's the thing, John. They looked mentally tired as well.
Yeah.
They looked – you know, I think they literally did think to themselves, like, it wasn't supposed to be like this.
You and I talked about this on Sunday. Eddie even came down and talked about this yesterday. Put them in an uncomfortable position, something that they're not familiar with, and then putting that physicality, that pressure, turning them over in that fashion, and then, I mean, it's like getting a wash rag and wringing it out. The Pacers were wringing out the Thunder in the second half and the fourth quarter of that game. And they just never been through that before.
Yeah. And they got a quick turnaround. We'll see if and by the way, one thing that and this is not anything breaking at all, but I did notice last night during the game there was a timeout, and Jarris Walker was out on the floor. He was wearing kind of like Birkenstocks, not Birkenstocks, but Uggs, like Ugg shoes, not boots.
Slippers?
Kind of like slippers, yes, but he was noticeably limping still. So not that Jarris Walker was somebody that was like a huge X factor in the series, but I think it's safe to say.
Do you ever feel jealous when you see Reggie Miller wearing clothes and he looks really good in clothes, whatever he's wearing?
Here's the other thing, John. I thought about this.
Yeah.
I think part of why, I meant to mention this earlier, part of why I think the last Pacers finals team and that kind of thing doesn't seem as long ago, because if you think about like the Portland Trailblazers, okay, I'll just use that as an example. Clyde Drexler looks a lot older than when he played.
Correct. Yeah.
Akeem Olajuwon looks a lot older than when he played.
Yeah.
You know, Sean Kemp, if you're a Sonics fan, looks a lot older than when Reggie Miller looks the exact same.
The same. Probably looks better.
He does.
Yeah.
But he does not look older at all.
Yeah.
And so he looks like he could have gone out there last night and played, right?
Well, I thought he was coaching. He was on the sideline coaching.
Was he wearing the Mark Jackson jersey to throw shade at ESPN for replacing Mark Jackson?
I think to do that and to try to get him a gig.
To get him the Knicks job,
Try to get him back in a gig. For some reason, he's been ostracized from the NBA, right? Mark has?
Yeah.
Good to see Mark was there last night, too. All the old Pacers. Haywood Workman, I think, is coming in studio a little bit later on, from what I've heard. So, yeah.
Yeah, so there were 7 or 8 of them up in a suite, and then, Reggie was down on the floor, and I mentioned Rick Fox was sitting in front of me, and Edgerrin James was there. I mean,
Terry Crews, the actor,
was there,
comedian, flexing.
So it was cool. All right, John, what's lined up on the big show?
I mentioned Hayward Workman. I think is coming in studio. Jeremy Schaap is going to join us.
That's
Has a
cool.
story about the Pacers, but also about Scott Pollard. Obviously that. And who else? Dustin DePurak's going to join us. I think Chappell's going to join us. Got a thumbs up from James over there.
All
Pivot.
right.
Are you going to make it to Pivot Balcony Bar tomorrow with us?
You know what? I will.
I know
make
you
it up
you
there
had
at
an
some point.
appointment yesterday at 4.
I did. So I couldn't make it down. But yes, I think tomorrow I hope the weather cooperates and it's as great as it
I'll
was
save you some
yesterday.
beers. I think y'all had like 9 or 10 yesterday.
Love that. I love it. All right.
Michelob Ultra.
I think Shannon had 2 Michelob Ultras at the game, right?
Did
so
you?
You knew it was a big event. Yeah.
I think I had 8 more than you during my show.
All right, John's up next. He will carry you home, and we'll be back with you at noon tomorrow, and we look forward to it. Austin Crozier going to join me tomorrow to get you set for game number 4. John recapping game number 3. He'll do it next.